So for today's movie review, I'll be reviewing a 1998 American surrealist psychological thriller, Pi, written and directed by Darren Aronofsky, who's also been known to direct films from Requiem for a Dream to Black Swan. And as far as this film goes, this is the first film he ever directed, which earned him the Directing Award at the 1998 Sundance Film Festival, the Independent Spirit Award for Best First Screenplay. And even though Darren Aronofsky has become well known for his later films, no one really talks about his first outing as a director. Like, I could be arrogant and maybe people have talked about it, but I don't see enough people drawing attention to it. Hell, the movie came in at 981 on the 1001 movies you should watch before you die. So, my two big questions are, one, is Pi a really underrated film? And second, should you watch Pi before you die? As for the plot of the movie, it's about this paranoid mathematician who searches for a key number that will unlock all the universal patterns found in both nature and the stock market. But as he proceeds to search for this elusive number, people from a Jewish religion along with a high-powered Wall Street firm hear that he's found this number and essentially attempt to seduce him in order to get the information out of him. They use it for their own needs. In terms of what I liked about the movie has a very interesting visual aesthetic, since the whole movie is in black and white. Not in the same vein as something like Schindler's List, because with something like that movie, not only is it in black and white, but there's also a lot of different shades of gray. With this movie, it's more visually interesting in the same vein as something like Sin City, where it is black and white, just minus the color accents. Soundtrack's pretty good, the cinematography is good, especially the point of view shots where it almost looks like they attached like a rigging system to the main actor and had the camera in front of him, giving like these interesting perspective shots as he walks around the city. And the overall premise of the movie doesn't really sound that interesting, but the way the director went about making the movie, he managed to take this idea and turn it into a 90-minute movie. Because when you really sit down and think about it, how would a guy trying to solve this math problem by connecting it to both stock market and religion sound interesting? Because the way he goes about it is, he shows the character going through his daily life, then has him talking to several different people from both his personal life, the stock market, and the religion, and they all connect together. Now, granted, there are definitely some parts of it that are far-fetched, like the religious aspect, because the way this comes off to me, it's very secondary to the entire thing, but it plays a bigger part as the movie progresses. Not to the point where it overtakes the entire movie, but there's definitely enough substance there to add to the overall structure of this movie. And also, the movie doesn't really have too many action sequences, but it does have a lot of scenes where people are just talking to one another. And that's fascinating because it's not an action movie that's keeping my attention here. It's just people talking about a math problem that's keeping my attention. Now, granted, it's not like the camera's focused on the two people constantly. It's more, we see like them playing like some kind of weird Japanese game, or like people are writing stuff down on pen and paper, or like focusing on other stuff to make the movie more visually interesting. That way the viewer is never bored while watching a film. And also, I can't name another movie where the entire premise is a guy's trying to connect this one math problem to both religion and the stock market. That to me is fascinating, that a movie like this exists with that kind of premise. In terms of what I disliked about the movie, as far as the actual structure goes, is not the most interesting thing ever, because when you really think about it, it's about a guy doing math the entire movie in terms of how this connects to both the stock market and religion. I don't think everyone will be on board for it, because if I had to sum up the movie, it's basically not only a character doing math the entire time, but it's also him having conversations with other people in a philosophical sense. And also, the movie is very talkative. Granted, the movie itself is meant to be talkative, but there are definitely points in time where I kind of zone out of the movie, but the movie does something where it brings my attention back to the movie. And the movie does have some action sequences, and the cinematography is very bad in these moments, because the cinematography for the most part is really stylized and it works for this movie. It's just when the action scenes do occur, they drop the cinematography that the film has for a good chunk of the time and switches to shaky cam, and it just doesn't work. And speaking of the action scenes, I found them to be unnecessary to the plot, because it feels like this movie wasn't meant to have action scenes in the first place. It just felt like it was meant to be just a talkative movie. Like, I feel like the chase scenes were last minute additions to the script. And speaking of the script, it feels like there's certain character relationships that aren't fully established, like the relationship between the main character and his neighbor, or more specifically, the main character with his mentor, because we see how they interact with one another, but we don't really get a sense of what their backstory is in terms of how they met and why the two of them are so close to one another. And from what I gathered, apparently there was a draft of the script where apparently their backstory was more fleshed out, but they cut out of the script due to time constraints. I think it's just one of those things where I would have liked to have seen more of a backstory between these two, because I think the relationship is one of the better parts of the movie. It's just, I wish we knew more of their backstory in terms of how they got to that point in time. So for my final verdict of Pi, the movie itself is very cerebral in nature, which might turn off some people because of how talkative it is, but the way I see it, the movie is so strange and different enough that I do recommend watching it, because it takes the very concept of the number pi, it connects it to things such as religion and nature in a very interesting manner. So overall, I do think the film's very underrated and worth a watch. I just don't think everyone will fall in love with it. And before we give my final rating, what did everyone else have to say about Pi? Looks like a lot of people like this movie. Granted, I think it's good. I just didn't think it was that good. And so for my final rating of Pi, I give it a 3 out of 5. So what's your favorite Darren Aronofsky film? And see you later.